Call to order of the Town of Newbury Human Resources Board. It is 4:04. Attending are Mark Leffman, Chair.
John Ferrara.
Anthony Antico.
Rick Harris.
John Lucy.
Diane Doyle.
Thank you. Let's take a moment and read through the minutes from our past meeting.
I'll make a motion to accept.
Second. Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved as written. Thank you, Diane. Next order of business is employee issues. John? Diane? Personnel actions and job vacancies. Diane, I know that over the last couple of months you said there's something's coming down the path.
Yes, I still have a finance clerk job description that will be coming for rating by the classification committee. We don't have it yet. It's basically a temporary clerk that might come in to fill spots for vacations or leaves of absences and so forth. So I should have that shortly.
Okay.
There was also a resignation at the library. The children's librarian has resigned, so her position will be filled/open. There may be some changes within the library. Somebody moving into that position with another opening then happening,
Right.
so.
I know they've done that in the past. They've been able to create a domino effect.
Yeah, so I think they're in the works of trying to figure that all out right now, but
Okay. Was that a surprise resignation?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. John, anything PD or fire department that you're aware of? Or? Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Just
And-
on the library, that's not a net new position. It's just someone's leaving and
Yes.
they're going to fill,
Yes.
maybe they stagger the way they filled them.
Yes,
But that'll
so
be
the
there.
children's librarian is a benefit eligible position, 32 to 36 hours per week. She's leaving to go to, I believe, Methuen. There's another woman that works within the library in a non-benefit eligible position that may, once it's posted, move into that slot, and then that would open up the part-time position for
Yeah.
this other opening.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Anything else in terms of personnel actions and or job vacancies? Next item of business discrimination and or ethics issues, none that I'm aware of. Has anything hit the desk of the employee reps?
No.
Okay, thank you. Safety issues, John?
No.
Thank you. All right, other business. We have a few items to address and readdress, starting with our discussion last month about a proposed job description for the town administrator role. And sent everybody the yeoman's work that Tony did in advance of today's meeting. Tony, thank you. I thought it was a great start to this conversation.
Outstanding.
Tony, why don't you take the floor here and talk about how you got to this point in time and other thoughts you have, and we can all take the opportunity to share our thoughts.
Okay. Unaccustomed as I am to creating job descriptions, that was never my job description as the kind of lawyer that I practice. But in any event, what I had done is I really, again, not knowing that much about it, I said I think I should apparently do a little gleaning. So online I went to various and sundry towns relevant, relevant to or equivalent, I should say, to Newbury, and to see whether they have job descriptions, and a lot of them did. And I mean, you can't write one-page job description as I had seen in several towns, or you can just multiply 5, 6, 7 page, single space kinds of things. You know, it's like, after a while, you get the feeling that you're writing a novel and you ask someone, listen, what's the average length of the great American novel these days? And the response would be 500 pages. You can't say at that point, good, I'm done. You know, so, but they were really all over the place. One thing that we have in the town is the statute. And there were no other references in all the other towns I looked at to an enabling act. Maybe there are in the Commonwealth, but nothing showed in my research. And then, so you have to start with the statute, and you really can't repeat it verbatim. The only thing I thought that I should do is to reference it at the top, because it has to become part and parcel of the job description. And then, so when you get that general idea, you say, well, what is a job description? So now you're honing it down. And there were a few human resources sites online, you know, that I went through. And like, I'm just looking at one, a job description writing guide, which was excellent, you know, but no, it doesn't cover everything. But the emphasis seemed to be on goal orientation. You know, where you look at it, because, you know, you can keep on going, you know, you have to do this the best, the best, the best. But specifically, what do you as the employee and the board here or whatever you look at is, did he or she accomplish that goal? And there were also many assessment guides online, you know, which are very helpful. So looking at all of those things, I put together something that I thought was, you know, at least workable, and you know, could be presented to the assembled board here, but it was very, again, you know, tell me to write a contract or something, then I'd you know, look out, here I go. But the job description is, there's so many angles and sides to it. It's not just the job,
Right.
it's how you create a document that will be used. It just can't sit there in a file with, oh yeah, we got a job description. Anyway, so that was my approach to it. So.
Well, given the fact that that was all virgin territory for you, I would suggest it was a great effort.
Oh yeah. Thank you.
In my opinion.
And an exceptional temper, it really was.
Thank you. So I thought what we could do is just kind of open up the floor to some discussion points here, and move forward towards it's like maybe a second, maybe even a third draft as we move along here. Anyone like to share their thoughts or observations? Or?
So I'll start. So Tony, absent of us getting together,
Yeah.
The month just got away from me. It's been nonstop. So absent of us getting together, so did you then take the statute, which listed the responsibilities and items that, and did you then take that and drop most of that information as you saw the responsibilities into this document?
In my paragraph 2, responsibilities, functions, and duties, those were meant to meet the statutory. Okay, because you've got two things. The statute says this is one of your responsibilities, and then so it has to be listed. But I didn't just put down the language of the statute, because, you know, I put it in terms of goals.
Okay.
But again, it's what I consider the high points of it, which in the statute itself comes from the section 11, which is the general powers and duties. This is probably one of the only times they get very, very specific in this section. So it seems to be very, very important. that you at least put that down, okay?
So, if I understand this right, we talk about the statute, so this almost would read, in compliance with the statute of 460, which basically is the purview of authority, it is the authority of what the Administrative Act does, and now this is going to actually make it proprietary to Newbury, so you're gonna have the statute and then proprietary things like we're looking for.
Right, well, it is proprietary to Newbury,
Right.
because the town is under that statutory edict.
Right.
That you will have a, this person, et cetera,
Right.
who's the administrator, the town administrator, with many, many different names that they have in the state, but yes, that's the whole idea behind that. But also to aggrandize some of the duties a little better than the statutory language.
And it's probably by design, it's a little bit ambiguous in the statute.
Yeah.
because How it's different,
Yeah.
I would imagine.
John, Rick, thoughts, reactions?
Well, I thought that it was very complete. I also looked back at the statute to see what was there. It seemed like that was in it. So I have a formatting suggestion, which is to make it similar or aligned with the other job descriptions in town. So just this one covers all the bases. It doesn't cover them in the same format as the ones that we had before. So that would be just a matter of tightening it up, going that way. Related to that, I thought that the reference to the act is actually appropriate to the section on responsibilities, functions, and duties, not on the education and experience requirements. That the act doesn't have any education or experience requirements, but the act does prescribe what the responsibilities, functions, and duties would be, and so it would just be a matter of taking that reference point and putting it under point number 2. But that's also related to reformatting this consistently, so we might find it in another place. So I had a couple of wording points like that, but I thought this is what we want to do, it's what we want to have. And then following on from this, the question is, what do we do with this? So that's kind of a separate section. I just looked at this and thought, now where does it go next once we decide what it looks like? So I would go back to John and get your thoughts on what you did with Tony's draft, because you actually created some additional language.
I did. Again, it's a writing style element and method element. I grew up in the world of writing, not contracts, but specific recommendations under strict regulatory rules. And it's a Department of Labor training level where everything is met with an abstract. You begin simple and then you go right to headings. Now, I would comment, and Rick comment about the headings. Education experience requirements. That would be up front and it would be complete. And I think in Anthony's element, I stayed in his format, but I made the comment that perhaps they should be moved up to the qualifications group. And so each of the language outline is really a one sentence, very specific, very simple recommendation as to what the tasks are and what the level of is required. Now, I, as Anthony did, read probably a dozen town administrative discussions throughout the Commonwealth, and I also brought it to roughly 5,000 to 6,000 to 7,000 residents and had a sense of it. And most of them, now I don't know specifically what Tracy's experience is, her education or her time within the same degree of work within the Commonwealth of Mass. But for the most part, I took the median with a minimum of BS and BA in public administration, political science and business administration, or similar fields, and a master's degree preferable. This is language that seemed to be median to a dozen or so that I read and read carefully. And I grabbed language and direction from towns that were remarkably similar from the East Coast all the way to the New York border. And then the minimum years and the emphasis on years of Massachusetts preferred, And then, obviously, the description of the things we expect one to know well, which is on page 2, and then continues on to page 3. And most of the stuff Tony's got in other places, and I just brought it up to the front of the book, if that is where it belongs, with Rick's point. Under education experience, I think that ought to be a replete and complete element. And then coming down to responsibilities and functions. I chose to say it outright that she is the chief administrative officer of the town. So that just a job description by title. And then she serves as an agent of the Board of Selectmen. That's just a clarification that we understand that. And then I added under the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen on several locations. And then a listing of all of the things that she needs to do above and beyond. What is efficient administration? Well, I've done nothing more than elaborate on efficient administration, bringing some simple language to it. Administrative appoints and oversees on page 5, that's just a small nuance in language. And then as personnel director, I thought that that was kind of important, and that ought to be listed on a fairly thorough basis, because it truly is her primary obligation. She is the manager of personnel in all the things that implies. If she's not,
Where does that fit in Tony's draft? Is that just something that's totally different?
No, it's
Did you
not.
pull it from someplace else?
No, it's not. All I did was continue M. The administrator performs all such duties consistent with the office, and all I did was begin to list more specifically under the administrator performs all such duties. So it remains under Tony's KLM.
Yeah.
And it's not, that's why it's inserted as opposed to on a separate page. And I'm not sure of the, again, back to your point, of the chronological order of all of this. And then I brought out very specifically her financial responsibilities and tried to outline those separately under a separate category, and then sort of talk about what I've witnessed her do in town meetings and in other board. I've sat in the back room under a few of the board meetings and watched what she has to do, and these are the things that I think she is very specifically required to do and to maintain, and if not directly, at least oversee. And then miscellaneous are just a few of the things that didn't come down other than, I mean, sort of even the agency that I belong with, these are the kinds of things that our manager does and that any manager does, and responsible for media and public relations and coordination of townwide information technology systems. And then I think there was nothing added to knowledge, ability, and skill, other than I moved a bunch of that up to the front. I thought that category 3 belongs in category 1 primarily. In other words, if we're going to describe the person for whom we're expecting to hire, for whom we expect so much, then that should be number 1. Knowledge, ability, and skill is part of the hiring description. Education, experience, and requirement. I left it in Tony's point, but I did make a note that it probably belongs up in section 1.
I didn't bring a copy of a job description in the current format that we have, but I think it has a structural thing, like reports to whom, blah, blah, blah. Then it has the responsibilities section, and then it has the education background, all that sort of thing. So we might catch some of those formatting things by following through on that.
Yeah.
On that.
I have, thank you, John.
Agreed.
You good, John? Good idea, thank
So
you.
Tony, you, again, absent of having the information, have you ever seen one of our actual formats
No.
of the job description?
I saw some online.
Yeah, I think between what you both have done, I think it lends itself to being able to take a lot of this and drop it into
Of course.
to the location.
It's a cut and paste job.
It's a cut and paste job and then another review. The only thing and I like the fact that we broke it out under kind of the different, categories, if you will, of what the responsibilities are. Under Personnel Director, item number 6, though, recommends appropriate classifications and salary plans for all town positions under the Board of Selectmen.
Under the Board of Selectmen. Show me the number 6.
Yeah, I'm wondering, classifications would come through, for any new positions, would come through a review by this board.
Okay.
I'm thinking maybe that's not something that would fall under her oversight.
Can I just interject here, just for the purposes of time here? I think what we have, clearly, between Tony's draft, John's editing, all of our thoughts, and I just add a couple of my own here in a second, I think we certainly have the makings of a complete, concise, properly formulated job description, no question. So I'm gonna recommend that we form a subcommittee, 2 or 3 folks, who will then take all of this and work towards tightening it up and creating a job description that is, as Rick said, is in keeping with the traditional document that we use. Although I will say that, you know, if there's any position that would allow us some creative license to format, this is the position. You know? So as an example, one of my thoughts was that, you know, after we reference the act, there should be a generic paragraph talking about kind of the overview of what this role is, and it's similar to some of the language you used, John. I said, you know, that the town administrator functions as the chief administrative officer in the town of Newbury. He or she is hired by and reports directly to the Board of Selectmen and directs the activities of all department heads as well as numerous commissions, boards, and officers. And I just, I snapped one of the points that Tony made that I think that doesn't belong under education and experience, and that is, need not be a resident of the town of Newbury. You know, that to me is an example, sort of a generic paragraph we would start with.
Yeah, just
You
an
know,
introduction to the position.
exactly, and then below that, maybe reorder some of the things I had. And if you look at most generic job descriptions, they do start with responsibilities, functions, and duties. So I would have a generic paragraph followed by Tony's point number 1, responsibilities, duties, and functions. And then I would consider reordering things. Number 2, leadership, communication, and planning. Number 3, human relations. Number 4, initiative. Number 5, back up to education and experience, which is consistent with what we typically do. And finally, number 6 would be knowledge, ability, and skill. It's sort of an amalgam of, you know, the new document combined with what we typically do. But that, again, that's just a formatting issue. I think, you know, we're in great shape here, I think, considering all the work Tony did, and John, thank you for all your efforts here. So, folks agree, a subcommittee to meet once, and I think, you know, using a template, you know, or a couple of them from current job descriptions, and get to it, and then maybe report back to the board next month what the results look like, and see if we can polish it up.
Sure.
Does that sound reasonable?
Sure. Tony, myself. Rick?
I'm happy.
Yeah,
to-
I'm happy to do it, too. I think what I find valuable in this type of work is to have one person do something that other people can react to, as opposed to a meeting to try to create a document.
Right.
So I would be happy to create the next draft using John's and Tony's and the format,
In the format, okay.
and then we could meet to have a look at what that looks like, and did what I do incorporate the things that have already been done, so I'd be happy to do that, to
Okay,
create the draft and then be on the committee that would
okay.
meet.
And then have a meeting, or?
And then a small group have a meeting
Okay.
about it.
Do you have, so who has this electronically?
I have it.
You have
I'll
it.
send it to everybody, so
And
that
then
you
do you-
can cut and paste if you
Okay.
need it.
You put a lot of work into that. Would you like to sit in the subcommittee as well, or?
Oh, I think 4 people is He's a platoon, not committee.
Okay, just, you put a lot of work, effort into this.
Actually, if you call me, I will arrive. Absolutely. If you want, I'd be happy to help out, but I think.
Okay, so
Diane
officially the
is-
subcommittee is Diane, Tony, and Rick,
Okay.
and John is available on an as-needed basis.
Okay.
So we'll include that in the minutes, and
So
John
this-
will forward to Rick this electronic
I will,
copy.
to all of you.
Just send it out, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I stole the flag from the police station.
That's where it went.
I told you.
I thought I saw that at the Will Cup the other night.
And then do you need a template?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you'll put it into the template and the three of us will set a meeting date
Yeah.
prior to the next meeting
Yeah.
of this board.
Do me a favor and send me that template as well, if you
Sure.
would, please, thank you.
Yep. I'll send
So,
it to everyone. I'll send it out to everyone.
The other thing I wanted to, this will keep it moving forward. The other thing I wanted to raise here was the idea of next steps. Like, we've taken the initiative to create a job description because it's the one role in town that doesn't have one. And it would seem to me that there's a step in there where it gets reviewed with Tracy, and then it would get reviewed with either JR or the entire board, but I think probably the chairman of the board would be what I would recommend. And so maybe that's Mark and Tony and would go with Tracy and JR and say, here's what we've done and here's why we did it and here's how you can use it in reviewing. Because they're gonna review her performance, so now this is somehow they've got something to use there.
Well, it's a standard by which he can, or anybody will be measured
That's right.
going forward, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, so that's just an idea for going forward. We'll pull it together first here and have a discussion by the next meeting, for our next meeting.
Right.
Okay.
Great. Hopefully we can get this done by Labor Day. And then we can get, in the next 60 days, get final draft.
Yeah.
Have Tracy take a peek to make sure it's consistent with what she does every day. Make sure it's consistent with how the Board of Selectmen perceive her duties and responsibilities. And be done with it. Great, great work. Thank you all. Next topic. Yeah, as a follow-up to a couple of conversations we've had over the last 2 months, there are 2 new proposed policies that we have discussed on this board, and both of them require, because they're benefit-type issues, both of them, I think, require both Tracy and Board of Selectmen to be comfortable with the policies, with the language. And so I thought we could spend a few minutes tackling both of those tonight and see if we can move the ball forward in both accounts. Starting with review of let's do the easy one first, the storm policy regarding emergency closing of facilities. As I mentioned last month, I had queried half dozen of the local communities of our size and type to see if we were mainstream or if in fact we were the outliers, and it turns out we were the outliers, as we talked about last month. 5 of the 6 communities that I reached out to, all in this general area, do in fact pay their non-exempt benefit eligible employees for emergency closing of facilities due to storms, due to electrical problems, what have you. So there is a consistency there. I thought there was not enough, or wasn't a broad enough sampling of communities, so I wanted to take it a step further. I contacted the MMPA, or MMA in this case, to talk about their guidance, or ask for their guidance on the matter. They in fact were consistent, saying that the questions come up in the past, and their board of directors have always recommended to various towns that is a practice or policy that should be in place. And then reached out to the online MMA community asking for, or soliciting examples or advice from them, and I got about 20 responses, just under 20, maybe 18 to 19 responses on this, and 85% of those responses were consistent. So I felt that was enough of a sampling. Now I've spoken to 25 communities, and of those 25 communities, 22 said, or 23 said, yes, in fact, we do pay benefit eligible, non-exempt employees for time that they are unable to work due to circumstances beyond control. One town did say our policy is if we can reach them in advance of them showing up to the office, they don't get paid. Otherwise they do, but other than that,
See your phone up though.
That's it.
full disclosure. But other than that, everyone was in agreement that it was the right thing to do. So I think we now have enough for sampling to suggest that that's the case. I also asked them all whether there was any time frame that they considered. Remember, that's where we got stuck last time, which is, well, what happens if there's a 2-week closure? You know, Diane made a point to me earlier today, but if it's a 3-month closure, it's easy, you know, people get laid off. You know, but if it's 5 days, if it's 7 days, and no one can answer the question, no one had thought about it before. They said, well, we'll take that on an as it comes basis. So I cannot offer any guidance on that subject. I think one time did say we limit it to 3, you know, to 3 days. They compute days as X, Y, and Z, or hours even. So we're on our own there in terms of whether we feel we need to have language that speaks to that point, or whether we just, you know, play it as it comes. That if there are extraordinary circumstances in place which require, you know, more than, say, 2 days of closure, we will take that under advisement and make a ruling. So it seems clearly that we should be heading in that direction. Is there any additional thought process or any new thoughts or any change of mind since we discussed this last month about whether it's the policy we should adopt?
I think it's, in spirit, it's the right thing to do. I just, legally, it's actually in the bylaw, not just in the policy. So it's gonna require an approval at town meeting to.
Which we have still yet to take all of those changes to town meeting anyway, so it's, I think that's one of the reasons why that was held off, so it could be incorporated in that as well.
Good. I should mention also the reason that it's important to have this discussion tonight, as long as the one to follow, is that I've scheduled myself into the Board of Selectmen's meeting tomorrow night to discuss these 2 issues. Closing of facilities as well as the sick time bank policy that we'll get to in a minute. After talking with Tracy about it, you know, she made it pretty clear that both of these require comfort level from the Board of Selectmen, given the fact that they are bylaw-related issues, given the fact that they are benefit-related issues. And so I need to make sure they have an appetite to go forward, otherwise it doesn't appear in the warrant. So whatever we come up with tonight, you know, even though we're not gonna be able to complete the task in terms of language, I can then go to the Board of Selectmen tomorrow and say, these are 2 bylaw/policy changes that the Human Resources Board is recommending. How do you feel about it? Assuming we get their buy-in, then we can go to work and craft the language.
I would think one very important or seminal issue in the storm policy would be to think through the number of participants in the town employment that are candidates for this change and quantify it. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. All we need is the number of employees, their hourly rate, and what's the measure of that aggregate group for 2 days of missed work, 3 days of missed work, 4 days of missed work, and it's either going to be measurable or to quote you from weeks back on another matter, a rounding error, and much ado about nothing. But I mean, I'd quantify it. That would be the first act. Who's eligible? What do they get paid? And what would that mean 1 day with a storm, or if you live on the lower green, 7 days with no electricity? The basic issue would be that 1 week would be measurable because we live on the coast and storms do strike. And we can always remember the large snowstorms from another decade, but the central issue is to quantify it.
So you're
Thoughts?
proposing a week?
I would think if we know what a week is, measures to be, in Rick's point, is that we would cap it, but then, to your point, have an asterisk next to it saying that in extraordinary circumstances, we will review it at that time, and be measured and be fair. But know what you're giving away. Town deserves to know that.
Thoughts? Yes?
Yeah,
I agree with that.
I mean, having the cap, having it at a certain point, whether it's 3 days, 5 days, that, you know, at that point, we're meeting up some entity that we
Yeah.
discuss, approving to extend that, whatever. I
Okay.
mean, I would definitely have it not open-ended, but.
I'm not sure I'll need that for tomorrow night, but maybe you and I could talk tomorrow afternoon, you can give me some basic math, how many, you know,
Okay.
there are 17 employees, or, you know, times X, the average hourly wage, and, you know, if that computes to 3 days, it equals this, it wouldn't be too hard to come up with. Okay.
What happens with the PD? If they don't work, they don't get paid? If they have a shift,
We
they,
always-
you show up?
Yeah, we have to, do that.
Okay.
We don't even go.
It's emergency,
Yeah,
yeah.
we do. They usually show up.
Okay,
No shutting down.
so, okay,
I would just think or one other thing to add in here is since this is the town employees serve the public, if the public can't get in,
That's what I was wondering, yeah.
then there's not a whole lot of work that's lost. I mean, it's not 100% of the work that's lost, because all the work that we're doing serving the public wouldn't be getting done on
You can't
that
just
day.
kick down the road, sure.
Yeah, so it's a matter of, there's probably some discretion about making sure that no work, or work is made up. I mean, that's the intent of the policy anyway, isn't it? That if you miss hours, you make up hours. The assumption is kind of a manufacturing mentality that we're putting out widgets, but in fact, we're actually putting out service. So it just seems to me that some language, once we get to that point, having to do with making every effort to ensure that the projects that people are working on and the timelines that they're working on are not sacrificed by lost work, or every effort to make up the work that's been lost, is something that I think good managers would want to do anyway. So if we say to people, yeah, we'll pay you if you don't come in because of bad weather, that's one thing. We're also saying as you're expected to make a contribution to the town and make sure that that happens. So I think both things.
I agree, I was actually kind of wondering how to phrase it, but you did it pretty well. I mean, it's just, each department is proprietary to what the impact is going to be. Every department is different. Hey, if these guys don't show up on this day, the impact is going to be different in the conservation department than it's going to be in the accounting department, you know. And so whether or not it's too much of a Herculean task to try to get the department head to say, to qualify it, what does one day kick down the road? What are the adverse effects on your department if we shut the switch off for one day? And then you kind of qualify it that way to get to your point as to what the impact is and what they might, you know, what the cost to the town would be. I think that's a component that has to be looked at.
There's no doubt the service element in governance, with a couple of days of heavy snow, the public's not going to show up.
Right.
But Kent Street's gonna be packed solid in the corridors the third and fourth day, because you'll not only have Wednesdays folks, but Tuesdays and Mondays folks showing up.
Yeah.
So-
Well, but
And it's an online service too, I mean,
Yeah.
there's the other thing too, I mean, it's not always people walking in, it's
Yeah.
not face to face, yeah, the business continues,
Yeah,
because a lot of that stuff is.
down over the computer.
Well, let's also bear in mind that correct me if I'm wrong, Diane, some of these folks are not public facing.
Mhm.
Some of these folks, depending on the time of the week or the month, dealing with
Sure.
work that may be more time sensitive, you know, on the second Friday of the month and maybe on the third Thursday of the month. And so, you know, I think we have to allow some leeway in that language. It's gonna be impossible
Mhm.
for department managers to be able to quantify, you know, this is the opportunity
Some
cost that's
variables, yeah.
lost in a day off, so.
Mhm.
But, good point, we'll make sure that the language speaks to that issue.
You
So
know,
he's
if I were-
recognizing it, but can't do anything about it, but we recognize it.
Right.
If I were the selectman, I would ask, how's this gonna work? So your proposal is to go in and concept and say, we would like to move this forward, but there's probably at least one or two of them are gonna say, how's it gonna work? And we're not ready to answer that question yet, so I'd
Right.
be prepared to say what we want from them at this point.
Right.
Not approval on language that we haven't written.
Yeah, I'm as much interested in making sure they understand that we are out of the mainstream as it relates to this practice and, or this policy. And if they're in agreement that it's the right thing for the town to be offering, you know, then we'll craft the language, which they'll get a buy-off on before it becomes new law and
Yeah.
policy, so. I just wanna make sure that conceptually they understand that, or they agree with this board that it's the right thing for the town to be doing.
Yeah.
So,
What weight do you give to the department heads on this recommendation? Because there are some department heads where, for example, what do you call them, the road crews, et cetera. DPW, they're gonna be, irrelevant of the weather, I think, if it's a weather-related event, which it all, in all probability will be.
Right.
What happens if a department head says, no, make every effort to get in because of whatever?
Yeah.
So
Well,
is that,
That's why I asked about the police. I think the DPW, they also serve as our road clearing crew.
right, so,
So they are
Essential personnel, I guess, is what they would.
essential personnel.
right, they're
So
essential. So
have-
that, I think that description or that entity has to be created. Essential personnel like we have in the military, you're
Well,
in.
that's a Tracy issue.
Yeah.
I think that is in the language of the current. There is some reference to essential personnel.
That's astute though for, Tony's point of department heads having some autonomy.
Mhm.
And each one of them has a philosophical bent within their group, and then they may want to override it. And then there are the special circumstances. What happens what does happen when a storm doesn't close the Newbury town activity, but closes the school system?
Mhm.
What happens when all of a sudden minor children are at home, their mothers or dads are employees of the town of Newbury, Newbury's running,
Right.
they cannot come in because there's no available help.
So the bylaw speaks to that directly, and it states that if they are unable to or choose not to come in because they feel unsafe traveling or they don't have childcare, that at that point it is up to them to utilize their own vacation day or make up the time. And
Okay.
it specifically states that in the bylaw, and we have followed that practice.
Yeah, and the flexibility that, I would assume the flexibility that department managers may have is, how will the work be made up? When will the work be made up? Will managers allow certain people to be working at home?
And it's back to Tony's autonomous
But I think our purview is to talk about, the change in the bylaw and the policy that we will create language, which will compensate non-exempt employees if the facility is closed. What happens below that is really, I think, an issue between Tracy and the various department heads.
I think another important point to make with the Board of Selectmen is that we are in the process of reviewing our entire bylaws. And a lot of them, although they're just wordsmithing and changes, this one was one that was, policy making, so that's why you're bringing it to them as well, in
Right.
preparation for it to be going on the town, warrant.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay, anything else on storm closings? All right, next one, which is the sick leave bank. I did my same research, same methodology as with the storm closings, reached out to that same 2 dozen communities. And we are also outside of the mainstream as it relates to sick leave bank. That virtually every one of these communities does in fact have a sick leave bank. One did not. One said, we have it, and if I had to do it over again, I would dump it, run as fast as you can. Everyone else was rather matter of fact about it. Yes, we have a policy. And so what I did was, rather than burdening you with bringing 20 different policies. I took some creative license here, and I found what I thought was kind of the average or the norm when I looked at all the variations that existed between, you know, how many days should be in the sick bank and how many people should be on the sick bank committee making the decisions about, do we say yes, do we say no? And, you know, how many days does each employee donate every year? It was all over the place. In terms of what the sick bank should look, the sick leave bank should look like, it went from 100 days to 400 days. In terms of how many days that they donate, it went from 1 a year to 3 a year. So it was all over the place. So I found one that happens to be local, the town of Wenham, interestingly enough. And, sorry.
One second.
Yeah.
I have to leave
I
right
know
now,
you said that.
and it's okay if I just take this and.
Yes, of course.
I'm assuming this is just gonna be discussion, and then we'll follow up.
Yes, nothing's gonna be decided tonight.
Okay.
So thank you, John.
All right. Yeah, you guys.
Take care, John. So, as was the case with virtually all the towns that I communicated with, the town of Wenham does in fact have a sick leave bank. They describe it as for non-union employees, so that it's not for anyone who's a member of a collective bargaining unit. And what I thought we could do, with your permission, is just go through this real quick, point by point, and I made a number of notes to myself to explain where we have some license to make decisions about various numbers, and see what you think about it. Why don't I just ask you to take a minute and read through that first page, and then we'll go quickly through some of the points. Let me know when you're done. We'll start at the bottom of the first page.
And what do you want to do now, having read it?
I just wanted to go through page by page real quickly. I'll point out the asterisks I have here where I think we can decide generally, is this good language, and if so, what numbers do we want to plug in, or what policy points do we want to add or subtract. So, are we all set, page one? So again, sick leave bank is voluntary for benefit eligible, full or part-time, non-union employees administered by sick leave bank committee. That sounded reasonable to me. To be eligible, obviously, you have to be actively employed. We get to point number 2 here, which is the first asterisk I have. Members must have been employed by the town for more than 1 year in a benefit eligible position. Some of the towns had no requirement for time served. Some had 6 months. Some had 1 year. This happens to be a 1 year. Seemed reasonable to me. Thoughts on that? You want to just go through the page first and then go back to the bullet points?
It seems like the idea of a bank here that I like is it says there's a certain number of days in the bank, and if they get exhausted, then, well, you don't over-contribute. You just build up the bank to 200 days, and then you leave it there. If it falls below 150, then you end up taxing the people additional days in order to take it back up to 200.
Right.
Seems like a way to keep it fresh, but also create some sense of limits to it as well. Like it's not a bottomless pit. I think John's comment John Ferrara's comment has been that it needs to be accessed after everything else is exhausted.
Mhm.
You know, so I don't
It speaks
see
to
that
that.
on this page.
Speaks to it. He will speak to it
Yeah.
further down.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. Again, this is just the requirements. Let me just go back up to eligibility. How do people feel about an employee being required to be with the town for a year before being eligible to participate in it? Is that too long?
No, I don't think it is, because you aren't eligible, as it currently stands right now, you can't use a sick day for the first 90 days of your employment here.
Okay.
So you wouldn't even have the time to give,
Right.
until 90 days. I think a one-year benchmark is, I think is a good benchmark.
It's reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay?
So, if I anticipate, or if I want to avail myself to this resource sometime in the future, then I have to contribute to it in the present. Is that what this is saying? Like, I have to put in days now, or I don't want.
I haven't even got, I don't,
My sense is that from our prior discussions, is this is a hedge mechanism. Should you exhaust your own cap?
Yeah,
And so it's a pooled hedge mechanism for planning. If you, and the 200 days, when you think about it, is ample. If one person goes out, how many employees do we have collectively that would qualify for this?
approximately 50,
All right, so
45 to 50. We have 45 to 50 benefit eligible.
So basically, the actuarial look at this is what are the odds that we're gonna have more than one, at worst two, in a given time with a 200 cap day. So to more than one or two people exhausting their full bank on their own, having been run into this pool. And you're right, the 200-day cap allows some self-control there. But you would have to ask the question, what happens to that individual 200 days plus? They're out, they're done. Or are they on a continuing claim with the new contributions coming over the portal, go out to an existing claim? Are there individual caps in page 2, 3, and 4, as opposed to?
We're up.
Okay.
We're getting ahead of ourselves.
We are, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think your point is on page 2, benefit eligibility. Generally, to be eligible for benefits, the applicant must have been a member of the sick leave bank program for 6 months.
yeah.
Well, I recommend we
So,
work
yeah.
hard to not get ahead of ourselves.
Okay, all right.
There are two kinds of eligibility here that we speak of. The first eligibility is to be in the program. You know, what you need to do or to be in order to be in the sick bank program. And the next piece of eligibility, which is further down the document, is eligibility for the benefits within the program. So let's just stick with the program itself. We seem to be in agreement that 1 year seems to be a reasonable amount of time. The next point is, newly benefit eligible employees must apply for membership in the, not for benefits, but for membership in the program within 1 month of becoming benefit eligible. If the employee chooses not to join during this eligibility period, they may not elect to join at a later date. Rather penal
I
for
find
the
that
town of Wenham, but.
I find that confusing though, because you're saying that they have to be here for a year
Right.
in their position, but yet they have to apply for membership within 1 month of being benefit eligible. So if you have a new employee
Yeah.
who's coming on board, within the first 30 days, they have to decide whether they wanna be in this program.
I think there's probably a word missing here,
I think-
becoming benefit eligible, Amy. I think they're talking about the sick leave benefit. So that'd be the 13th month.
Newly benefit eligible employees.
No, because that, again, they're not asking for benefits now, they're just asking for membership in the program. Well, all employees are not benefit eligible after 30 days, are they?
Absolutely. They start accruing vacation time and they're eligible for health and dental insurance within the first 30 days.
Okay,
So they have to apply for membership in month one, but they are not eligible until one full year in that benefit eligible
That's
position.
the way this language reads, right?
Yeah,
I guess the question is, let's not get hung up on the 1 month, the question is, should there be a one and done enrollment period for this program?
how would you know enough about the benefits program in your first 30 days to make this election? You'd have to have some awfully,
So you're
Well,
saying,
it's part of your employee
in theory, do you get
package.
one shot to
That's the
decide?
question, that's the question. Should you, if you don't, then there's,
I'm guessing this is meant to avoid pre-existing condition, thoughtful
Yeah.
issues.
Right.
And if you allow an open-ended, later think it through, somebody gets ill,
Sure.
they raise their hand for participation. Pre-existing conditions can be brutal, and that would absorb not only their allotment, but the 200 days, and then back to the question on page 2, which I won't ask again. What's the cap?
Right.
I think that's a pre-existent
I'm sure it is, yeah.
hedge mechanism.
So,
Leave
let's
it.
not get hung up on the 1 month language. The question is, should there be a provision in here which says, you know, once you become eligible after X number of days or within a certain number of months, you must decide whether you will participate in the program. Yes or no?
Yes, I think.
Just to be clear, I think it's still on this page, participating in the program means donating your own sick time
Correct.
into it.
Correct. Nothing to do with benefits yet.
Right.
Eligibility
The only
for
way you
benefits.
get benefits is if you participate in the
Correct.
program.
Right. So should you be given one and only one opportunity to participate in the program at a certain point in time? Forget about the 1 month.
I think yes.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
Tony?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Membership requirements. Each member shall contribute 2 sick days to the bank upon enrollment in the program, and 2 days in July of the following year. July 1st, I assume, being the start of the fiscal year in all municipalities.
Mhm.
Thereafter, members shall contribute 1 day each year in July until such time as the bank has accumulated 200 days. Once the 200-day limit is reached, all contributions shall be suspended unless or until the bank drops below 150 days, in which case they can recommence making 1 day additional contribution. People can donate more if they want. How do you feel about the 2 days in the first year, or upon eligibility, and then 2 days in the following fiscal year in July?
Well, again, if someone is eligible 1 month after they start,
Yeah.
they don't have sick time to give at that point.
Say that again?
If you're asking people to be newly benefit eligible who must apply for membership in the program within 1 month of becoming benefit eligible.
Right.
So membership, each member shall contribute 2 days to the bank upon enrollment.
Right, but go back to point number 2, which says that members must have been employed by the town for a
Right.
year.
I'm hung up on the eligibility and the selection period, because if you're 30 days a new employee and you are benefit eligible, you're making a decision whether you want to participate in this program, but at that point, you do not have 2 days to give
Mhm.
upon enrollment. You don't accumulate sick time until you're 90 days an employee.
Okay.
So I'm getting hung up on
Yeah.
that.
Well, it doesn't specifically say that applying for membership in the program constitutes contributions until they're ready and in your bucket to contribute. I mean, we'd have to be sitting in the administrator's office down in Wenham to find that answer. But I can see where you could join the program and then have to have a wait period before you actually have the money to give, the days to give.
All right, let's not get hung up on that point.
Okay.
We're gonna have to craft some language
Okay.
there.
Okay.
2 days? 2 days twice and then 1 day annually thereafter?
Yeah.
Sounds reasonable, I mean, the
Yeah,
employees.
Sounds very reasonable.
And it's
It's measured
it's
as opposed to.
consistent across the board of what you are allowed to do versus what you ought to do.
Mhm. Right, right, you can donate more should you choose to, okay. Sick leave contributions to the bank are non-returnable or non-refundable. They do not go back to the individual, that was consistent with virtually all of the towns that I know that was one of our discussion points, I think, last month. Number 3, the balance of unused sick days shall remain in the bank at the end of each fiscal year and shall accumulate from year to year.
And just roll
Excuse me.
over.
I'm sorry, just come back, the sick leave contributions are non-returnable. Obviously, if you happen to be a member of the bank who finds himself in a position to request help from the bank,
Right.
then they're going to be
Oh, sure, yeah.
returnable to you.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely, yeah. What this refers to is you can't contribute them
people
and then,
that
and then upon
contribute,
retirement
the
or.
contributors rather than the users
Right.
of the, yeah.
Right. Yeah, good distinction, thank you, Tony.
I think on number 3 here, the balance of unused sick days shall remain in the bank at the end of each fiscal year and shall accumulate from year to year seems to be contrary to this idea that there's a 200-day limit. So,
I think the word accumulate is probably inappropriate and shall roll over year to year. I think that's what they're saying, is it'll remain in the bank and then roll into the next fiscal year. The 200 will carry.
yeah, okay, if that's the sense. I
Yeah,
was
I think the
thinking
word
200 one year,
Yeah.
400 the next,
Carry but not,
600 the next.
Right. I think accumulate means the current sum will just remain static until used. I'm guessing that.
Well, that's where I would like to see ours.
Yeah, it should say roll over from year to year. Would be worth a conversation.
I had a point, number 4 is, at least a piece of it does not belong here. This refers to membership now, membership, not benefit eligibility. Membership in the program, it says applications for enrollment in the program shall be made in writing, of course, held in strict confidence, of course. And then it says such request shall include sufficient detail concerning why the request is being made, including appropriate medical documentation.
no,
That's in the benefit
Exactly,
eligibility section,
yeah.
that should not be in the inquiry.
right.
So we're gonna scratch that,
Yeah.
starting with such, that doesn't belong.
Other than the fact that membership requirements is that they have to give insurability proof before they're allowed to get into the pool. So it does have a measure of requirement for membership. It's almost like having to have a part 2 in any application for insurance coverage. You have to give medical evidence, and the questions are 4 pages deep: family history, current history, medications. So if somebody has a pre-existing condition, appropriate medical documentation is supporting the claim of request, unless they're talking about an actual payout.
Well, yeah, if you read the end of that sentence, it says, including
Claim.
appropriate medical documentation to support the claim in the request.
Yeah, then
That refers to a claim for benefits.
then it should be
Not-
on, it should be on page 3 then,
Right,
page
exactly.
2.
Yeah, so we're gonna scratch it from there and move it down. Okay, the sick leave bank program shall be administered by a committee, which shall be comprised of the TA, finance director, and 1 non-union employee. All the towns have this language in it. My recommendation would be to increase the number from 3 to 5, which is what most towns have. You don't wanna be in a position where, there needs to be a majority of the board voting in favor of anyone's request. If you have 3 and 1 is gone at any one point in time, you're left with 2, you can't get a majority necessarily.
Yeah,
So I would suggest we increase it to 5. Town administrator, finance director, perhaps could be two employee reps, or 2 employees of the town, not necessarily the employee reps, and 1 member of the human resources board, or something along those lines.
yes.
Okay? Minimum of 5, including at least 1 HR board member. The sick leave bank committee shall be authorized to approve or disapprove applications for benefits. Upon receipt of an application, the committee shall meet as soon as possible, consider the request, but render a decision within 10 days, sounds reasonable. In deciding whether to grant the employer request, the committee shall consider all of the following.
Okay, and then we go on to the next page for all the
Are
following.
you okay with these
Yes.
bullet points?
Yep.
It's not, it's not the definitive list, but it certainly represents, right, the reasons to say yea or nay. Number 3 is important. If one of the committee members submits an application, they have to recuse themselves from any deliberation. All information be provided strictly confidential. The committee shall provide an annual accounting of the program in July of each year of the participating employees, including the number of members, the number of days remaining in the bank, and how many days or hours were distributed the previous fiscal year. That sounds reasonable. Benefit eligibility. Generally, to be eligible for benefits, the applicant must have been a member of the sick leave bank program, not an employee, but a member of this program for 6 months before request for benefits. That sound reasonable?
Sure.
Sick leave bank committees shall have discretion to make exceptions to this eligibility requirement.
Fine.
It seems reasonable. Members who are receiving workers' comp are not eligible, right? To be eligible, applicant must have a medical condition verified and documented, which requires prolonged period of recoup and or absence from work, resulting in the exhaustion of all earned, sick, vacation, personal, or other paid leave, which is one of the points you were making earlier, right?
Yep.
Comfortable there?
Yes.
Committee may require an applicant to undergo a physical exam by an independent physician at the town's expense. Number 5, this is where I saw a whole range of requests. Some towns had it up to 45 days. Some had it as few as 50. 20 to 30 was kind of a statistical average or norm here. When it happens to say 20, in increments of 20 days. You apply for 20, up to 20, of course, anything that's unused goes back into the bank, that's a given. But employees may request up to 20 days. Request for additional days by the same employee must be accompanied by a new application. Any additional grants by the committee may be made again in increments up to 20. However, such additional grants shall be solely within the discretion of the committee. Any unused sick time returned to the bank. 20 days seem like a reasonable, 4 weeks, a reasonable amount of time?
Yes.
Let's talk about that one for a minute. If people have exhausted all these other avenues, that means they're already going to be out for 3 to 6 months, depending on how many different avenues they've got. Doesn't mean that those other things they will have exhausted.
Is it that much time, would you say? 3 months?
Say that again?
If somebody's used up all of their,
Sick time,
sick time, vacation time, personal, other paid leave, could that be 3 months plus?
It just depends on how much they use in the course of a year and how long they've been here.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
you could have someone that's a 10-year employee and they have no sick time left because they use it every year. You could have a 10-year employee that has 960 hours or 6 months available to them because they've never used a sick day. So it's hard to determine.
Sick days roll over?
Sick days roll up to a maximum of 960 hours.
And that's 24 days. 960 hours. You think about how many hours a week, a day does somebody work?
8.
8, so 8 into 960,
Mm-hmm.
what do you get?
120.
Yeah.
Right?
12,
Did that answer your
96, yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Well, no, so 120 days is 6 months, so let's say that's happening.
Right.
It seems to me that someone that's sick,
120 days, 6 months.
someone who is sick enough to exhaust the other resources that are already there,
Right.
I'm wondering if another 20 days is gonna do it for them. So, I mean, if they really are in need of critical care, at what point do you determine that they're good enough to come, they're well enough to come back to work, or that they need an extra 20 days? I mean, 20 sounds like not probable for someone that would need to access this type of resource.
Well, but to Diane's point, you know, on the other end of the scale is somebody who may only have, based on their longevity, may only have 30 days
Mhm.
of time available. You know? So it's, you know, it's barely a month.
Well, the other way this is phrased is that they get 20, and if they need to apply again, they can, right?
Yeah, in increments of 20.
Yeah,
correct.
okay.
Yeah, so there's no limit. It's just that, you know, each of the towns had this language in it, that it was not an unlimited supply of sick days available to them, that there was a finite period of time. 20 days, 30 days, 45 days was the most I saw.
Yeah,
So we can use any number we want, it doesn't have to be 20. It's whatever.
I'm gonna change my mind and say I think that is a good idea, to put a 20-day limit on it, because it starts both sides, the manager and the employee, thinking about when are you coming back. And so I think that's a good idea. Keep
Other
it at
thoughts?
20.
20, okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
Increments of 20. Number 6, any sick leave accumulated while an employee is receiving benefits from the sick leave bank shall be returned to the bank. That's interesting language, so,
So if you're out sick,
but you're accumulating more sick days, it goes back to the bank. Right?
Yeah, you can't double dip.
Yeah.
You can only get it once.
Okay. An employee may withdraw from participating in the bank, but shall not be eligible to rejoin. In the case of withdrawal, all donations made to the bank by that employee prior to such withdrawal are reversible. I can't imagine circumstances where somebody would be withdrawing after, I mean, what would be the reason somebody would?
Or
I'm
you're
not
being
sure.
taxed a day a year, you might resent that, I don't know. Once you've built up your 2 days and 2 days,
Right.
and then you're only a day a year,
Right,
say, I don't wanna be in this anymore. I don't-
yeah, it seems unlikely, but I mean, language doesn't hurt. I guess the question is, regardless of the reason why, should people be eligible to come in and out of the program? It would seem not to me.
Right,
So we'll leave that language. For the purposes of a program, a day shall equal X, a week shall, you know. Maybe you can help us with that, whether those are the right numbers.
right,
Number 9, approval of benefits shall be granted by a majority vote of the sick leave bank committee, which is the reason I thought we needed to go from 3 to 5. Said approval shall not be unreasonably denied and shall not be subject to appeal or contested in any manner. This too was consistent with all the language I saw. That the decision of the sick bank committee is final. It's not subject to arbitration, it's not subject to review, it's not subject to the Supreme Court. You know, it is what it is. People okay with that?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I'm wondering is, why don't we just, why is it voluntary to opt in? Why shouldn't it just be a policy that said, in order to provide our employees with the maximum amount of assurance and health care, we're going to establish a sick bank, and what that means is, we're gonna take 5 of your sick days over the next 3 years, 2 and 1, and 1 day ever after that, in order to do that. And all this opt-in, opt-out, I don't know, just seems like another, it's a little harder, I guess, or harsher, isn't it?
John's the expert in these matters, but as a layperson, I would think it's the same as saying to someone, you know, we're only gonna pay for 2 of your fillings, not 3, over the course of your employment. I don't think you can take away a benefit, this is a benefit. isn't it?
well, I think the way you would propose that is, in order to provide a benefit for all of the employees as a whole, you know, we're making the recommendation that we take instead of, we have a very liberal sick policy here. We get 3 weeks, generally speaking, 3 weeks of sick time a year. I think that's very liberal. You know, we're gonna propose this change. The benefit to you as an employee is by making this change as a benefit that you currently have, it provides the opportunity that if you needed it down the road, that there's this employer-wide, I'm not really articulating it well enough, but you're giving a benefit, but you're taking a benefit.
Right.
You're giving them this potential by giving up a little bit now.
Sure.
So I don't think it's strictly just taking something away, you're trying to,
But I guess my point is, I don't disagree with you, Rick, that it would make it, the administration of it a lot easier if it was a requirement for all employees. See, now what we're dealing with is a voluntary program for employees who want to contribute. What you're referring to is changing the benefit program of the town,
Yes, that's right.
which is another whole kettle of fish. Right?
All right, just on that alone, I withdraw my suggestion.
I mean, it's a book well taken, I just don't know how practical it is given, you know, the employees that are already.
Yeah.
This might fall flat in its face.
Well, we,
Among all the employees of a town, for example, say, I don't wanna get involved in that,
yeah.
nothing doing. So, it's a gift.
and it's a motivation, I'm still stuck with the motivation. In sick time, when you think about it, is it 10 hours per month?
For full-time employees, it's 10 hours per month, it's
And-
120 hours
Yep.
per year.
Yep.
If you work a 40-hour work week, that's 3 weeks.
That would take you 8 years to accumulate the 960.
Correct.
So the folks, the folks who are not eligible for that program are the only people that we're talking about here. Or is that going to be eligible to all full-timers as well?
Well, we have part-time people that accrue 5 hours per month.
Okay,
So anybody that's benefit eligible works 20 hours or more.
okay. Well, the idea, I'm just trying to think of I'm trying to think of, in insurance terms, the base that's going to support this program. If it's voluntary by nature, and folks are gathering 960 days, but over 8 years, maybe this is their manner of saying that it's going to take me 8 years to be guarded with the maximum amount, so I need to be in this program for the interim to the 8th year. And then it caps out at 960, it doesn't get any greater. And altogether a disincentive to go out and get private coverage or participate in any group LTD long-term disability coverage that the town is offering.
Well, long-term disability is if someone's permanently out, they would receive a benefit.
Understood, but short-term and long-term.
Short-term, this would basically eliminate the need for short-term disability.
Wow. Short-term disability typically a 7-day waiting period that runs for roughly 6 months or 90 days, depending on what the LTD kicks in. And that's a measure of premium, and depends on whether the town's big enough to self-insure the second element. And obviously, the pregnancy issue, the number of women in the program, and all that implies because of short-term. Again, I'm back, I would love to sit with the folks in Wenham and say, what incentivized the town to create this plan? What do the rest of your benefits mirror and look like? Did you speak to the
No.
town administrator, or you got this online?
Yeah, I got this as a response from, I can't remember what the employee's role was. I don't think it was the town administrator, it could have been a human resource director, could have been a finance director, could have been an employee rep, I don't know.
Do you have a counterpart in Wenham that you've ever spoken with?
Oh, I can make the call, that's easy now.
And just ask them if they would be willing to give us a 1-hour sit-down to help us think through what was the incentive for the bank formation?
You're saying the incentive to the town.
Incentive to the town, to the employees, what are the rest of you, what's your program look like that this benefit was inserted?
Well, I think it's two questions, that's why I was trying to sort it out.
Go ahead.
The town would take the initiative to have this be part of the benefit package. The employees need to take the initiative to participate in it by contributing those days, and they have to opt into the program and they can't get out of it, or if they do, they can't get back in. So there's something that would cause an employee to make an affirmative step here to say, I want to be part of this program. What is it?
For what it's worth, and again, I didn't ask the question this way, but based upon all the examples that I received, this being one of the 18 or so, the language was virtually the same with every one. At no point did I see language that said all employees, you know, upon becoming benefit eligible, are now in the program, the town offers this as part of the benefit package.
Yeah.
in every case, it was a voluntary program. So my guess is we could ask any one of those 20 communities the same question, it's not just Wenham.
So going back to your purpose tomorrow night with the selectmen, all you're trying to do with them is give them a heads up to say, we're looking in detail to this idea of a sick pool
Right,
bank.
this is, I think, what we can comfortably describe as fiscally neutral. This is not a budgetary issue. This is employees volunteering their time to a coworker, so it doesn't have any fiscal impact in the town, correct me if I'm wrong.
Does it add another desk to your job?
Oh, absolutely. Another desk? No,
I
another-
mean, you're gonna have,
Oh, it's
you're
gonna
gonna have to-
be a lot of administration.
and it's gonna fall on your shoulders.
Mhm.
I mean, that is an expense to the town.
Yeah.
No, but that's, I think, given where we are now, I think the question is, do we think Mark should take this to the selectmen tomorrow night or not?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Do we know enough to do that?
And so what I was trying to clarify is you want to take it to them as a heads up, not as a proposal.
Yeah, conceptually,
Okay.
we're considering this based on a lot of homework we've done.
Yeah.
It was Tracy who brought it to my attention in the first place, based on a practice they had, I'm not sure, it was
West
by
West Newbury.
in West
In
Newbury,
West
yeah.
Newbury.
Yeah, and that led me to the research, and found out we are in fact in the, I can't say for sure we're in the minority within the Commonwealth, I didn't get 351 responses. But based on the responses I got, only one said we don't have a program.
Would you give us 15 minutes, sit down, just to talk about the incentive in West Newbury that brought them to do this? And
I know it's very dated, and it was
I
back
believe
many,
it was,
many
yeah,
years, but
it's
I
been,
mean, we can
yeah.
certainly ask her.
did she implement it, or did she oversee it?
Yeah, I don't know if it was her program or if she inherited it,
All right.
and it certainly wasn't as comprehensive as this.
And do you know your counterpart down in when?
I think there was a change recently, I don't know, but I could
Okay.
certainly call a few others.
And I would drive down if they would give us the time and sit and ask a few questions and ask them to explain
Right.
not only the inauguration and the incentive to the inaugural aspect. What
I
drove
will-
them
I
to?
will mention, they'll be able to speak to the impetus, they won't be able to speak to I think to the practice or the results, because if you look at page 4, you see that it was adopted by the Board of Selectmen May 3rd, 2018. So this is fresh off the
So,
My guess is they have not had a
And one of
request for them to
the operative questions to ask of Tracy, how many people out of the entire employee block in West Newbury actually joined in the voluntary aspect? And the same question, except they've only got a short history here, so that.
I can ask those questions, those are easy to ask.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
What, talking about benefits and everything else, but what the town provides is the administration of an inter-employee fund. That's the benefit for the town. And it's, without that, they're not giving, the town doesn't give anything to anybody here, other than what you earn for. And I'm saying, listen, X, Y, Z of me, you can take a couple of days, et cetera, et cetera.
so I just have a couple quick questions that, to follow up what Tony just said. So one of the things that I think is something that we brought up at the last meeting is, you really have to be careful, the sick bank committee, in reviewing the applications, because again, you turn one person down, but you approve someone else, and is there a liability issue on the part of the town that you're being discriminatory in terms of the illness or the injury or what have you? So I think that's something that we would wanna have town council take a look at. So I'm leery about having either members of this board or other employees serving in the capacity to decide who should get sick time from the bank and who shouldn't. The other thing that I don't think we've taken into consideration is the FMLA laws that pertain to, so Family Medical Leave Act. You can only take so much time off where your job would be actually held, as opposed to, you can't have someone on sick leave for, I'd have to go back and look, the FMLA I think is, I've been drawing a blank. But virtue of giving people additional time off beyond what they've already earned, that would take them beyond a Family Medical Leave Act hold on their job, that's something that I wonder how that plays into this policy as well.
I would think that would have to play into the negotiation of that committee.
Right,
Without
there's a
a doubt.
standard Family Medical Leave Act number of, a
Right.
period under which your job is held, if you're out on family medical, whether it's a sick yourself, taking care of a sick member of your family, or what have you, the town is obligated under the federal law to hold your job.
Right.
Beyond that, whatever that time
But
period
not pay you
is.
for that job.
Right, but I'm just
Right.
saying, if we're allowing people their existing time that they have accumulated in their own sick time, and we're gonna give them another 20 days, I bring it up because I wanna make sure that there's no contradiction to
Right.
what is.
Understood.
But that wouldn't jeopardize that.
Right, they're two separate issues, we're paying you, but then there's also this Family Medical Leave Act where your job's only gonna be held for a certain amount. Whether you're sick for 9 months or what have you, your job is only covered under X. So that was just another thought that came into my head, as far as
Well,
how
it's a-
this
it-
gets. I mean, this is an administration, this is a lot of work. And I'm not adverse to, if the town wants to go in this direction, I just wanna make it as clear cut and succinct and clear to employees as possible. So I wanna make this as simple as possible.
Yeah, I
Not
think
just from
that's-
an administration, but for people to understand and for it to be administered.
Yeah, I think
You
it's-
are a third-party administrator in
Right.
every concept.
Right.
It's somebody
Right.
else's money, so the Department of Labor is all over that, because it's not your money, it's the employee's contribution to the bank. And you are acting as third-party administrator, that's what legal counsel has to talk to, the DOL issue and the liability. And now you come down to the committee of 5, and all of the instruction to the committee of 5 of what they may and may not accomplish or do. It's not unfamiliar to any sick leave issue where, and I saw language in there that they are at the discretion should somebody abuse it. Now, that's an awfully broad word, and who's gonna make the judgment as to too often to the bank and abuse of the bank? My goodness, that is fraught with liability. That's a legal quagmire.
Well, as is the case with any existing or proposed policy, it has to be in the mutual best interest of the town and the employee population. And if upon further review, the decision is made that the administrative nature of this practice would be burdensome, or risk jeopardy of one form or another to the town, Board of Selectmen may not have an appetite to put it in front of town meeting, so I'll make sure that's clear.
I think if we're a precedent, daytime, it's the Augustinian aspect of, it's not worth the candle. The specific Latin translation is fishing with a gold hook. It's not worth the candle, and that's why I would love to sit with whomever you work with down in Wenham, or a counterpart, and say, what's the incentive and what's the measure of liability that you see, and why is it worth so much? Why is it here? What makes it so attractive that you sit down and write a 3-page treatise and administer the plan, not for free. We have a talented person sitting at the end of the table who will have one more task added to her already large requirement. You know,
Welcome to the jungle.
you might know that the whole idea, until somebody can convince me that the incentive is unattractive to me.
Okay, well, we certainly have enough to be able to present to the board tomorrow, the concept as well as the challenges associated with it. I'll be sure to balance those tomorrow in my presentation. Anything else on either the sick time or the storm policies? Thank you all for a great conversation on both. Next meeting, July,
Actually, it's the 23rd, that's an error.
July 23rd.
Yeah. Fourth Monday is the 23rd. An error.
July 23rd. Any issues with that date?
Not currently.
Okay. If there's no other business, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Seconded?
Second.
All in favor?